We are live.
Hi, everyone.
Happy Zappadan, Zappateers. It is night 17.
Whoa.
Though for us it's night 16 because we have only covered 16 albums. We got one more day, but two more albums to cover. This one is a big one.
Mm-hmm.
Very important in the man's discography. Lumpy Gravy. Now, this occupies a very interesting space in Zappa's discography. It's technically his first solo album.
Right.
It's very short. It's only about 31 minutes. And it's really meant to be just drunk down as one whole. And
Definitely.
which we literally just did before doing the video. We had another album on deck, which we pretty much have memorized. Again, this week before Christmas. Those of you who are working during the holidays, our hearts are with you. This is a stressful couple of weeks.
It's been so hard to find the time and to make the time, and there's been a lot of social obligations, but the videos have been really important to us.
And mind you, we want to be doing this.
Right. So it's just making sure that you're not drinking too much eggnog and leaving in a reasonable time. I liked that where it was. Thank you.
You like the Veronica Lake look?
Yeah. But
Shoot real hard over the eye. Extra severe.
What was I saying?
Just it's been so busy. That's why we're coming on so late tonight. It's 12:30 local time.
Oh God.
Yeah.
So yeah. This is such a cool album.
Yeah, it is.
It's really him. He loved Dada art, and he was a true artist. And I think this is his way of making a Dada album. It's a mix of quick cuts. There's tiny verses, and then there's snippets of talking, and there's snippets of these kind of.
Let's talk about that one
Sure.
One at a time. So you're absolutely right. It is this Dada collage patchwork. It's also Frank's first artistic statement as a solo artist, separate from the Mothers. This was recorded and conceived after Absolutely Free. And yes, the dialogue, the so-called piano people. There's a ton of Frank Zappa folklore that's born on Lumpy Gravy.
Mm-hmm.
What's your takeaway from the dialogue of the piano people? Because it comes in a few different acts.
I think it's really cute. I think it's really cool too.
What do you like about it?
I like that when I was a kid, my grandparents had a piano, a baby grand, and I used to lay under the piano as a kid, and I would look at all the parts. So they had this big soft white carpet, so I would lay under the piano, and my brothers and I would bang on the keys, and then we would open the hood and look inside the piano. So I've always loved exploring the piano. I love the piano as an instrument. So it's cool that he wrote dialogue for tiny people that live inside a piano.
Well, then there's also the content of what they're talking about.
Right.
In the first act, it's almost like they're waking up and they're wondering where they are. There's sort of it reminded me of No Exit by Jean-Paul Sartre, of sort of, I've been out there. I've seen the outside. It's dark. It's lonely. Lots of existential.
Well, it's kind of they're talking about a world without music. They live inside the piano. They're surrounded by music. And he's saying once you're outside of the piano, you're not surrounded by music. It's dark and lonely.
Oh, you're onto something. Then you get that line, bit of nostalgia for the old folks. Then much of Lumpy Gravy Part 1 is dominated by these stories of Motorhead Sherwood talking about his car, cruising for chicks, working on the B-7 bomber or whatever it was.
Something like that.
Furthering our theory about the Laurel Canyon crowd. Defense contractors becoming rock stars. Anyway, we also get some very recognizable bits of Zappa music.
We do. And the funny thing is, this came first. This was the chicken or the egg.
This really was
the chicken or the egg.
It's the Rosetta Stone.
So it's kind of funny that we picked this one as one of the last ones that we're doing.
This was intentional.
Because it's you have things like Oh No and like what's the ugliest part of your body is quoted. A couple other like ones that were like, oh, have already heard that.
The orchestral pattern heard near
Right.
the end of, I don't know if I can go through this again, is
Yeah.
heard on Mother People at the end of We're Only In It for the Money.
Right.
You get Oh No for the first time. The Lumpy Gravy theme itself, credited here as Duodenum, is such a beautiful piece of music. Frank would come back to that on Make a Jazz Noise Here, or Best Band You Never Heard in Your Life. Either way, the 88 tour featured that song.
That's a really cool track. It has very Spanish sounding guitar and really good horns on that song.
On the Lumpy Gravy record, what you're hearing is sped up. It's an old Studio Z construction. The Lumpy Money boxed set, which I love these repackages, but holy crap, try changing these discs when you're going down I-5.
No, you can't.
Let me take the wheel with my knees.
That is insane.
This is like a hazard.
The only thing worse is that Beatles box set where everything is like in a sleeve inside of another sleeve inside of like an iron
Cellophane
vise
inside the paper sleeve, inside the record,
and then
inside
there's like
the box.
papier-mâché like bow that you have to open.
I'll do you one worse. The 4 CD Making of Freakout Project Object box set.
Even worse.
Here's what it did. It opened up like this. It was like it's like one of those fortune tellers. Check this out. You got a splinter?
Yeah, I think so.
So it opened like so, but then it also opened like a lotus.
Oh no,
so it had
I can't.
4 discs, 1 per panel, and Andy Allen was like, try changing this when you're driving down Highway 46.
God, yeah, that makes me really anxious.
So anyway, Lumpy Money does include the original duodenum theme from Lumpy Gravy in its real time from like 1964 from its Studio Z construction. A lot of it's Frank's first dabbling in classical music. You have him working with the Imuka Orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
The Electric Incarnation would be the backdrop band for orchestral favorites. A lot of conceptual continuity intentionally started from this point.
Mm-hmm.
I say it is the Rosetta Stone of Frank Zappa because it truly is. It's just about impossible to understand, bereft of the context of his future works. This must have been a surreal experience to listen to in 1967.
Definitely.
Before all of the other occurrences of these other songs, of these ideas, which would manifest later as thematic works across songs and albums.
It's collage art in album form. It's like you've got a lot of things that are chopped up and cut up and pasted back together and kind of put in different places, and you get little passages like, the track called Bit of Nostalgia opens with like a fake out surf rock jam. And then it goes into talking, and it's like, okay, I get it. That's really cool. Like, who would have thought to do that kind of segue? But like now lots of people use surf rock as a segue. It happens pretty often. Quentin Tarantino like has several scenes in movies that are split by surf rock. So I think it's really cutting edge and came ahead of its time for sure.
Certainly. I can't think of too many other albums even really constructed like that weren't made by Zappa.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I can't either.
The emphasis on dialogue, the content of the dialogue, it's so bizarre. Side B, the dialogue is dominated by talks of pigs and ponies. There has been some pretty good speculation as to what pigs and ponies are. Pigs are the state, ponies are the church.
Oh, okay.
So,
that makes me think of...
so with that in mind,
yeah.
What's your take on the dialogue about pigs and ponies, the white ugliness, the sort of Chicano dialogue about the horses and stuff? So what's your takeaway from that?
Interesting. Yeah, when I first heard it, it was very reminiscent of Pink Floyd's Animals, which is one of my favorite albums of all time. And in that album, they're talking about sheep, pigs, and dogs, which is kind of easy to see like who fits into what category. You're a sheep, you're a follower. You just kind of do like whatever anyone says, and then when you're a dog, you're a dog, and then a pig is a pig, which is pretty obvious. So I like that he which this album came first, right? Before Animals.
Animals was 77.
That's right. So I like that he kind of pioneered this like people as animals thing. I think that's also pretty cutting edge.
Mm-hmm.
What about you? What do you think about it?
It is very cutting edge, and it would serve as a running metaphor
Mm-hmm.
in his works. He never got this is his first real explicit critique of those two major institutions in a big way.
Right.
I enjoy the Piano People dialogue. It's creepy. There is something endearing to it. When we were listening to it, and the first bit of dialogue of, where am I? I said, it's almost like that scene in Munchkinland.
Yeah.
They're all like coming out and like, oh, we welcome you. It is sort of like an introduction to the inner workings of Frank Zappa's mind. And there are some musical passages that are downright bizarre, like the Musique Concrète. It's like listening to a Salvador Dali painting come to life.
Mm-hmm.
We get a blast of King Kong, not in 3, but in 4. Did you recognize it?
I did, yeah.
It was in a different time signature.
Yeah, that was really neat.
So cool to hear these little blasts of the Mothers, this indoor orchestra, the sort of the jazz ensemble that does the Oh No.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, towards the end of the album, it gets kind of classical, which is interesting. You have a little bit more rock in the front half, and then there's some classical pieces that float in towards the back.
Right, and that is much of what the original Lumpy Gravy had been conceived as.
Mm-hmm.
Frank had signed a contract with Capitol Records to do a solo record, and I think about 22 minutes wound up being produced. It's all on the Lumpy Money Project Object thing. And much of the classical piece became what you hear on side B, like Envelops, the Bathtub, all those strange little percussion bits.
Right.
The stuff with the high strings and the high flute and piccolo. And then it ends with the adage that round things are boring.
Round things are boring.
I don't think there could have been a more stone statement ever made.
I agree with that. Yeah, this is such a cool album. I think it's like, I love that he did this so early in his career. I love that it was his first solo album.
Yeah.
I think he like really took it and made it his. I love that it's like a scrapbook of like his kind of works of art, but done in audio form. I think that's really neat.
And then the coda in the finale to the album is Take Your Clothes Off When You Dance, which is a song also, and we're only in it for the money. Another tune that goes as far back as Studio Z. In fact, the recording here goes as far back as PAL, when it was Paul Buff's recording studio. The impressive thing about Studio Z was the fact that it was a 5-channel mixing deck. And at this point in time, the Beatles were recording in 2-track.
Frank was really cutting edge.
Well, Paul Buff had built the studio. He built the 5-track recording apparatus himself.
Is this the Rancho Cucamonga?
Yes, it is. And the idea was it was optimal for surf recording, because you could do drums, bass, guitar, organ, saxophone, or vocalist.
Very cool.
Overall, what's your takeaway from Lumpy Gravy? It's his 3rd album. It looms large in his discography.
It does.
You heard audio of him calling it his favorite record. Gail Zappa told me over email it's her favorite.
I think that's really cool.
It's a bright star in the constellation.
It is. It's definitely like, I think it's quintessential Frank. I think it speaks a lot about his ethos and what he thought art and music should be, which he didn't think that it was like these two separate worlds of like, I don't think he ever wrote a song unless he was making fun of a genre that was like verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, which is like the very typical structure for songs.
Mm-hmm.
I think he liked doing that kind of poetry where you would cut things up and throw them in the air and like see where they landed, and he did that with music. And he did that with this album. I love that he included people talking. I love that he included like, I love all the clicks and like the trills and like the weird noises. I love that. I think that's really cool. So
I love his willingness to do that cut up technique, because he also would construct his own building blocks, start to finish. And in the case of Lumpy Gravy, that included having fully realized classical pieces.
Right.
The piano dialogue, that's easy to do. Just stick your head in the piano and hit record. But a lot of this other stuff is fully orchestrated material. And some of it's the mother's jamming.
Mm-hmm.
You really get Frank in all of his different modes as a thinker, as a player, and as a composer. It's quintessential listening. I don't think any Zappateer's discography is complete without it. It's one to own, even if you only get it out once every now and again. It's a crucial work. It is sort of like not to get overly theological, but it is like more of a dense metaphysical listen.
I agree.
There's explanation and exposition of ideas related to philosophy, the nature, the philosophy of music, the role of the state, nostalgia, California culture. I mean, these are all big things in Zappa's career, and they're all touched on here first. And it's almost, you almost think that like Freak Out and Absolutely Free were building up towards this.
I agree.
His work is so cumulative in these different stages. And the last thing to point out, and then we'll sign off, is the conceptual continuity at play here. This is the first of a series of albums that were meant to be linked, spanning Frank's entire career. Here's the front cover of Lumpy Gravy, looking like a little kid, all indignant with his hands on his hips. The back cover is Frank the composer. So the front is Frank Zappa, mother of invention. The back is Frank Vincent Zappa, American composer, asking, is this phase one of We're Only in It for the Money? Then we get We're Only in It for the Money. And on the back cover, while Bunk Gardner ponders his musical career and Billy Mundy looks like he's ready to kill either the photographer or himself, Frank is wondering, is this phase two of Lumpy Gravy? Phase one of Lumpy Gravy. Phase two of We're Only in It for the Money. And it climaxed in 1994 with the posthumous, but fully realized, Civilization Phase 3, which perhaps you'll join me for it if we can squeeze it in. It is a lengthy listen, and we both have work tomorrow. But we know for sure that we're going to cap off with at least one album for Zappadan. I will for sure join you for Civilization Phase 3.
Sounds good.
And then one more beyond that, which we're for sure going to do.
Yep.
But happy Zappadan.
Happy Zappadan.
We've got one more night. And being that we're after midnight, happy birthday, Frank Zappa.
Have a good night.
He would have been 78 this year. Can you imagine him, a crotchety old man on MSNBC, shitting on the conspiracy theories?
Good night, all.
Night all.